to the Citrus Collab discussion on XLAs. Today we're going to take a step through some of the challenges I think that you've already shown in the initial survey, and really give you a view on how we believe that this market is going to change in the next year, 2-3 years, because it really is a time of change, and the reason for that is exactly what's given in the survey. So 3% of you basically say you're happy with the SLAs. Most people are not, and that's, if you look at the customer side, it's a lot worse, being honest. So this is a great start. So let me show you this. This is a picture, and some of you may already have seen this. This is the inauguration of Pope Benedict in 2005. Obviously, for the Catholic community, a very, very happy, momentous occasion in Rome. Now, this is the same place in 2013 with Pope Francis. And what you see here is basically in 2 slides, you see the difference and the journey that we as a market, if you will, have made in a very short period of time. We're online, we're recording, we are broadcasters as much as viewers of our lives. And so if you just think about that for a second, I think it's right to ask the question, in a world that has changed so much, shouldn't you change the way that you interact with that world? And the SLA concept and the KPI concept, I would say, has served us well for a good period of time over the last 30 years, but really it started to have less and less value in the last 10 years. And one of the reasons for that, especially when we talk about the service management community, is the whole end user as a concept is dead. You know, end user is something that I've had a beef about for the longest time, but end user is a term that was developed in the IBM mainframe era, where this concept was there was somebody at the end of the mainframe, and that was an end user of what we sent out to them. And today you still see that mentality that we are supplying and managing and supporting end users. I would say to you, that's dead as a doornail right now. It's the business consumer is king. Now, while some of you may well be supporting real ultimate beneficial customers, many of us are supporting the business consumer. So let's take a little look at what the new challenges are. I think, first of all technology teams are incented right now to create digital solutions that really excite way beyond the usual measures of business viability and technical feasibility. And the consumers have become more and more savvy. They understand technology, and they understand what they'd like to get from technology. So they don't need to know how a solution was created. Many of them, instead, they want an emotional need met. So we need to build an emotional journey for IT that has logic sprinkled in it. So it's an emotional journey that's underpinned by technology, but it's not a logical journey aggressively managed with technical key performance indicators. And that's going to be a big cultural change. It's a big technology change, but it's a change that we need to make if we're going to remain relevant in the new world. Now, luckily, ITO version 4 actually makes a step towards this. It does talk about moving towards outcomes. It does talk about creating value streams, and it does talk about experience. It doesn't, however, give very much insight or guidance as to exactly how that is going to be created. Now, for those of you who've been around a long time, really what the XLA is doing is fighting the watermelon. Many of you will be familiar with that term of having watermelon KPIs, where the outside is green and it actually covers a very red sense of experience by the people experiencing the SLA. So we're going to fight the watermelon, and we're going to do that by putting people first. Now, the essence of SLAs is doing what you're supposed to do. And the best that you can get from that is satisfaction. Experience is about doing what really matters. And that's a very different thing. And we'll talk about that in a second, about how is that different. So today, I think most of us, if we're advanced, we will be talking about consumer satisfaction or customer satisfaction. Very few of us are measuring and reporting on the customer experience that we are presenting them with. And that's what we're going to talk about it. When you look from the business side of this, then the SLA is very poorly regarded. And nowhere is that clearer than if you're in an outsourced environment and you have an outsourced environment that is being run on the back of SLAs with KPIs. And if you talk to the business leaders, they would say an SLA is just a series of secrets, lies, and assumptions that you've made up KPIs to actually deflect from the experience and the service that you're offering. And that's harsh, and that's harsh. And when we talk about an outage, the business is usually talking about outrage. And they can't believe in this day and age that we are still engaging with them the same way we would have done before there was an iPhone, when we were still using flip phones. And essentially the SLA is the flip phone of 2019. So we need to change this, and we need to bring in new words. And they're all words that we talk a lot about: the customer experience, the return on investment, the relationship, the ambassadors, the smiling, the appreciation. These are all the terms that we have to now bring in to our design process. Today, less than 2% of the KPIs we use in IT are based on experience, empathy, and emotion. And very recently, I was talking to the director of the digital workplace solutions of a very, very large international bank. And he had just put in place a tens of millions of dollars contract to introduce a form of VDI to his customers. And the major goal behind that was to be customer centric. And so I asked him, okay, this is great. You've made this massive investment to put in place a virtual desktop, and you're doing it to improve the customer experience of about, I think it was about 60 or 70,000 end users in his terms. And I asked him, so what KPIs are you using to see whether or not this massive investment is actually working? And he looked at me and said, Alan, that's a really good question. I don't know. Let me get back to you. And about a week later, we spoke again, and he said, you know what, I looked at the contract, I looked through it, and we have zero KPIs on this process that are related to the customer experience. And then obviously we didn't laugh about it. We were sort of like a gnashing teeth type of smile. But I said, so you're obviously very confident that this investment is going to lead to better customer interaction and a better customer experience, based on the fact you've done absolutely nothing to see whether or not that premise is true. And this is not unique to this bank. You see this across the country and across the world. And this is kind of what our relationship with our business consumers looks like. It's a whole series of binders that have clauses and reports. And most of those reports are to explain, or try to explain, why the business consumers are dissatisfied with the service that we're offering them. Now, the thing that's sad about this is that not only are the business consumers not happy, but you and your teams aren't happy about it either. Because I would say most people working in technology want to do a good job. They joined the service management community in particular because they have an aspiration to provide service. They want to provide a good experience. They want to provide a service that helps to grow the business or make the business more successful. So nobody wants to be in a business that's not cool. Now, the good news is I want you to mark your calendar. As Lisa says to me, you know, she goes in and says to people, what day is it today? Write this day down, because this is a new day. Write down today XLA, because that's the day you heard about it, and this is going to be a day that changes your life. And I really hope that that is the case. So let's welcome you to the modern experience level agreement. And let's look at what that is. Sorry, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I think this is a good time for me to throw up the this next poll.
Absolutely.
And actually, what I say is even more facetious than that. It's get out a piece of paper, write down your name, my name, today's date, and XLA, because you're going to hear about it for the rest of your career, and I want credit for it. Okay, we've got the poll, and we've got only 40% voted. Let me just give that one more second. We are at 65%. And Mark just tweeted that he really liked your analogy of the watermelon. And we're at 80%, so I'm going to close that down. Here we go, sir. Your results are 53%. Getting my head around the concept, 31% understand it, and 14% have years of experience, but we call it something else. I love that.
Okay.
And also feel free to chat in what you call it. That's interesting to us as well. So let me get that closed down, and you keep on rolling.
Thank you. Excellent. So, I'm happy that people are excited about it. I'm also happy that certain people are experimenting with it. Because it is exciting, and of course there are always people who are learning about this the same time I am. You know, I'm not that exceptional. I just have a chance of talking to some of these people earlier than some others do. So that's excellent. It's excellent. There's a body of knowledge growing around this area. So for those people that are not familiar with this, let's see how we at the CoLab talk about XLA. So first of all, the most important thing about an experience level agreement, in my perspective, is it's a dialogue between stakeholders. And it's an ongoing dialogue that we calibrate. We live in the world of agile and incremental development. And this is an incremental dialogue around the experience that we're presenting. So it doesn't shut down at any one time. It's not frozen on a particular KPI percentage of anything. It really is designed so that we, and if we have a sourcing partner, that we and the sourcing partner are looking at the experience that our customer has in the same way so that we can collaborate to improve that experience. It's also about shared context, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second when I show you some of these examples. Shared context combines what others know well with what we know differently, and that can be the customer themselves, and it can be our sourcing partner. And shared context is important because when we're talking about experience, you can't understand the experience that somebody has if you don't understand the context within which the service is being consumed. And that can be very different. The same service can be consumed in different ways by different customers. Now, what you will find, this is certainly what I have found, is when we do share our context, it amplifies respect. So when we have a dialogue with our customers and with our sourcing partners, as opposed to viewing them as vendors executing a contract, you'll find that the discussion of context amplifies respect, because now people feel that you're really trying to understand how this service plays a role in their lives. And I would say that XLA therefore has respect at its core. And to finalize that, I would say, if I look at SLA, SLA is a contract, but XLA is a commitment. It's a commitment that you are making to deliver an experience that helps at best, helps your customer to have a good day. At even better, it's going to help them achieve some fundamental business goal that you understand they're trying to achieve. Now, when you do this, there's a Nobel Prize winner, the German Max Planck, said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that's very, very applicable to the experience level agreement environment. So let's take a look at that. What is it that we do? Well, the first thing is we distinguish between output and outcome. So output is looking at technical uptime, function points, story points, code production, team efficiency. We're really looking at how good are we at executing the output, at creating the output, at executing the activity. Outcome is a lot more about what is the business experiencing? How is the customer feeling about it? What's the engagement that the employees have? What's the commercial impact that the service is having? And what's our time to market? So these are things that if you want to have a dialogue with your business customers, these are things that they want to talk about. So that's a good thing. So we're actually now in a position to talk to them about things they care about, which helps us to offer them a service that makes them more, give them a more rewarding experience. So now let's look at Exhibit 1, because everybody tells me, so what does this kind of thing, what does it look like? So let's look at the digital workplace, because I do feel it's one that a lot of you will recognize, even if you are not working in it. It's one that we all work in, especially in large enterprises. We all have a digital workplace. Now, Citrus Collab has a partnership agreement with NextThink, and NextThink has been developing a lot of the underlying technology, because just like everything else in service management, it is going to be people, process, and technology. So we need to talk about the dialogue. We need to talk about the process, but we do need underlying technology to help us to create and manage the process. Now, we designed something called the Digital Experience Score for business consumers of the digital workplace. Now, what does that not look like? It does not look like this. So when I'm actually working with a customer right now who has over 50 performance metrics, and they all look a bit like this. They're a list of things that they want to measure, or they want the sourcing partner to measure. They've given it some type of a weighting. They've given it some type of contours of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. They measure the actual performance, and then some googly gook number comes out at the bottom that says 67.1. That number means absolutely nothing to anybody. But it will be the basis for the next 5 years for how this organization will work with its sourcing vendor and how it will talk to its customer. Now, if you look through this, I'm sure some of you recognize some of these things in places that you've worked, or maybe where you've worked today. And this is not where you want to be. So where do you want to be? Well, first of all, I said earlier on, context matters. And context is really about linking the left-hand brain with the right-hand brain. So we're not giving up understanding application usage or technology rollouts or workplace performance or any of that, but we're adding to it. How happy are you working with the applications that you've got? How well are the landing zones working? How engaged do you feel given the technology we're giving you to engage with us? How are you experiencing the support that you're getting? So we're adding in all of these sentiment factors to create a new journey. And the journey is not based on the output metrics that we've seen earlier on. It's based on a common understanding of the context that the business customer has. Now, I'm going to give you an example. Some of you may know this. You may have seen this before. So this is a flow zone diagram created by Forrester. And what they show you here essentially is a day in the life of a customer in a typical workplace. And what you see at the top of that, the blue area, is what they call the flow zone. So that's the area that they are working consciously and happily on their work, on their project, on their service, whatever that is. Everything in that gray area is a distraction that takes them out of the flow zone. So between the time that they arrive and the time that they leave, in many large enterprises, the actual amount of time spent in the flow zone is very, very limited. Now, I'm not going to talk about the technical view that you can see in the NextThink Finder, but what we do in the NextThink Finder is we actually track what's going on, what's getting in the way. Why is there a VPN crash? Why is there a server area? How is that server affecting this? How does the workaround and all of that? That doesn't affect all of the workflow, but it does affect a lot of it. Now, what we then can do is we can create an experience journey. So we can say, in order to move this customer from a 7.05 employee experience score up to an 8 and beyond, we need to do certain things. And each one of these things will improve the experience for that customer. And these are things that we can actually technologically measure. And the difference here, as you can experience, is we are measuring the things that impact the experience. We're not measuring the things, but we're saying, okay, if we improve this, then we're going to get a better result. And if we do those things, and we do that in a consistent way, then what we see is that the flow zone improves. Now, there are still things that happen. People still have lunches, people still have meetings that distract them, people still have a break from email or whatever. But what we are now able to do in this particular case, and it's just an example really, is that we can improve the experience that that business customer or consumer has because we've taken them through a better part of the day in the flow zone. And we can measure that and we can see that. Now, let's see how that pans out. So the digital experience score rates this employee digital experience, and it's defined as the ability of an employee to get things done by interacting with the technology environment in a safe and enjoyable manner. Normally, we would be measuring these 6 things. So we would be measuring their ability to produce and collaborate. We would be measuring their ability to access and use the web. We would be measuring their vulnerabilities and security. We would be looking at how their device is performing, and probably for most of our consumers, what is the business app score? How successfully are they interacting with their business apps, whether that's CRM or whether that's a logistics system or whatever. And on top of that, we actually specifically look at the employee satisfaction score, the sentiment score. Now, by doing it in this way, we know that we can measure it, and we can measure it in the context of that particular journey. We can now offer things that are much more useful. We can now say to people, we can actually say to our business, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. The most painful area that we have today is the device. The worst performing region is Latin America. And the reason is it's suffering from an absence of a standardized workplace and standardized software deployment. We can actually, there's lots of things we can do with this. We can benchmark this against other industries. We can show different industry lines. And of course, there are other things we can measure around very specific business apps. So now I hope you can get a sense that we're in a totally different discussion with our business consumers when we can talk about these things rather than, 93% of incidents were resolved within 24 hours, and I'm just very disappointed that yours wasn't one of them. That's not a great conversation to have. In fact, I was working with a customer the other day, and I had to go to their, they have a sort of physical help desk in the headquarters that you can go to and have a conversation. And while I was there, I just listened in on 2 conversations. One was somebody was saying, I can't access my Outlook on my mobile device. And I kid you not, the answer was, yes, that's policy, because we are now migrating to the cloud, and that's being done in random batches. And so I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but it will happen sometime in the next 10 days. That was followed by a woman, and I kid you not again, who said, have you got any updates on my incident? Because I've now not been able to work with Outlook for 11 days. Now, because I am a bit of a nosy bugger, I went up and I said, how do we track? I'd like to see if this woman who hasn't been able to access her Outlook for 11 days, where is she showing up in our KPIs and statistics? And of course, she wasn't showing up anywhere. And I told the CIO, you don't know who this woman is. She knows who you are. If she ever gets the chance to knife you in the back, she will not miss that opportunity. And you have no understanding as to why she feels the way she does. Not only do you have no understanding, you have no way of measuring it, and you are not incenting your support staff to be successful in their job, which is providing service so that business consumers can do theirs. So let's move on. So having said that, so XLA really it's about a framework to encompass long-term value and sustainable growth. So usually when we do an XLA framework, and now I'm moving beyond the conversation just on digital workplace, we try to create a framework in the area that we're looking at that contains about 7 pledges. No more, it could be less. These are the certainties that technology is pledging towards the business consumer. And we're defining the emotional indicators that focus on what really matters for that user. I hate the word user, how did that get in there? And it's a code of contact. As I said, XLA is a mindset. It's got to be embedded in the way of working. We've got to help people design these and create the context and create the dialogue. And then we get to things like this, no hassle. So let's just ask very basic questions. How much effort did it take you personally to get an incident resolved, a service requested, the information needed, the change I wanted? And this isn't just airy-fairy. Years ago, I started on this journey because when I was at ING, which is a large bank, I was charged with creating a new unified communications service. Our customers were very unhappy, and that's everything from the phone service, that's from the mobile service to the conference facilities. All of that's in there. And again, I found out that we had over 56 KPIs. And those 56 KPIs were all green, and yet everybody on the business side felt that our service was lousy. So there's a mismatch. So I invited the suppliers in, and I talked to them about this. And one of the things I asked them was, how many people do you have who are focused on measuring KPIs? Now, originally they didn't want to tell me, but I could tell them I had 23, I kid you not, 23 full-time equivalents who did nothing other than measure the KPIs and prepare the reporting for our monthly joust between us and the supplier to try to blame each other on who was at fault for this declining relationship with our business consumers. So what I said to them is, imagine we don't have these 56 KPIs because they're not helping us anyway. Imagine we have only 3. Then, and if you're okay with 3 and I'm okay with 3, but we both agree that that KPI, that XPI, that is going to be the thing that guides us. This is going to be the thing that unifies us in how we try to make the life of the business consumer better. And we did it. And that is basically the beginning of the whole concept of XLAs that Giarta, who at the time were our outsourcing intermediary, then took up and developed into the XLA framework that we have today. And that not only allowed us to improve our experience score, but it also allowed us to redeploy those 23 FTEs into more meaningful and fruitful work. So this is not just some sort of pie in the sky, airy fairy thing. This is something that works. It's something that will improve your life, and it's something that will improve the life of your staff and team as well. So what I would like to do is I'd like you to join us on this journey. Citrus Collab has said we're going to be the home of XLA. So we're teaming up with the ITSM Academy, we're teaming up with Giarta, we're teaming up with NextInc, and specifically to address the sourcing area, we're teaming up with the Windsor Group. And we've developed things to help you and your teams make the transition and start this journey. So with the Academy, we have awareness programs that we call the Essence of Experience, where we teach people what are all the components. How do you get started? What do you start to look at? How do you have the conversation? We actually have more intensive workshops. So we have an Envision experience where we actually create the XLAs with a team. And we also have the XLA ambassador. Because the other thing that you see in large enterprises is that you don't want to be dependent on external people for the relationship you build with your business consumers. So we've also invested in creating an XLA ambassador so that your people can learn to be the ambassador for technology around the experience that you're offering to your customers. And we're designing and implementation programs today in these specific areas. The digital workplace services area, where you can see XLA as the bookends of the digital workplace service. And the same thing we're doing with outsourcing innovation, DevOps modernization, post-merger integration, and HR onboarding. So these are the things that we're developing to try to help you kickstart this process, but also with the intent of helping you make the steps so that you are now in control of that dialogue and you're creating meaningful context with your consumers. And at the back of this, we've got the growers creed. So we're also saying, how's the culture going to change? And so at the CoLab, we've created something we call the growers creed. I'm not going to go through it right now, but it's really opening up. It's really being vulnerable. It's really about creating experience, about how we can team, how we can be more flexible, how we can create a great experience. So take a look at that. It's on the website. I'm very interested in any feedback that you may have for Lisa or I. And with that, that's my pitch. So I'm ready to have conversations.
Well, Alan, you got through that more quickly than I thought you were going to. So let me put a call out for questions, and please, and let me share some of the comments with you. Rose says, I really like the term shared context. That is a new term for me, and it is powerful, and that powerful is in all caps. Let's see. Well, and Greg's making a point that he says the point is you should design your SLAs properly in the first place. I could not agree more, Greg. And this presentation is assuming that many SLAs were done poorly. Because as we saw in the first poll, only 3% of the folks on the call today are happy with their SLAs. And what I've seen, what Alan's seen, what probably a lot of folks here have seen is that SLAs do have a long way to go. And Alan, I thought the pictures from the Vatican was very powerful. That's in a short time a very large change in how we all, I forget exactly how you said it, but now we're not just participants in our life, but we're documenters of our life, or something along those lines.
We're broadcasting, right? So if you go to, I'm not sure it's 100% positive development, but you go to a concert now, we're recording and broadcasting that concert, whether we do that in real-time streaming or whether we put it on Facebook or Snapchat, wherever we put it later on. So we are now taking control of our experience, and it's important to us because, as you saw between 2005 2013, there's been a massive move to this. So it's not just one or two people; our entire culture is moving that way, and with the consumerization of the large enterprise, we see it all the time, and that's coming out now also with DevOps, right? So if I expand this conversation to the DevOps environment, we see increasingly that the DevOps teams are going to be responsible for designing the experience. And there is a movement in the DevOps community from projects to product. And once you start going to product, you're back in the context of the business. And so in the DevOps community, they will also need to learn to not just talk about commits and code and backouts and things like that. They're also going to have to learn to talk about the experience that they're creating in their sprints. So this is across all of technology. And I tend to that Greg says, you should design good SLAs. It's almost impossible to design good SLAs because very few SLAs have any context in them. They are very much a description of the service, and very rarely do they have any context of how the service is being consumed. Now, if you have done that, that's great, and maybe you're doing a great job, and you're at the leading edge. But I would say most of the SLAs I've seen, and especially those ones that are governing outsourcing agreements, I haven't seen a good one yet.
Yeah, well, I've seen one good one one time. It was like a little bit of a unicorn. So lots of people are asking about the slide deck. Yes, it is available to you in the chat to download, or you can go to the ITSM Academy website and then click on webinars, and you'll be able to download it from there. Or just click on the link. And actually, I'll grab that link and repost it in just a second. Jeremy's asking, to the earlier comment about defining SLAs right, which part of an SLA captures employee/business user sentiment?
Are you asking?
Yeah, I am asking you that, Alan. Oh, we just lost your audio.
I don't know if he's asking me that or it's a rhetorical question. When we first designed ITIL back in the day, there was a diagram that didn't start with the CMDB, and I think it's important for people who are coming into ITIL later on. When we designed ITIL, the CMDB was a concept. There was no tool. So we didn't design like going to a CMDB or doing anything with the CMDB because it didn't really exist. It was a concept. So what we did was we took a top-down view of how the business service was being translated into applications. So there was room in that original approach for us to define the business service that the application was serving. And I could argue that in some SLAs you would put it in there. The problem that we had there is we didn't have the technology, and being honest, we weren't even thinking about experience at the time. As you go down, you generally start to get sucked into the technical realities of delivering the service. So you start to get talking about availability, about component impact, component failure impact analysis. You start talking about resilience design. So you start talking about all the things you need to do to create the business service. So there were SLAs that had that business service described, but then it quickly, I think, went into what do we need to do to deliver the service, and then we fell back on all of these technical KPIs that we use today. And I'm not saying the KPIs were never useful, because in the old days when business consumers didn't exist and they were end users and they were happy that anything worked, and we did create a lot of progress with ITIL and ITSM. All I'm saying is now, and certainly since I would say 2009, 2010, that world has gone. And if we want to remain relevant and we want to leverage ITIL version 4 and we want to leverage DevOps and we really want to make the change, now is the time to move to XLAs.
Oh, thanks, Alan. Sorry, I'm having a little technical problem on my end, so I'm loading. People apparently can't see the chat with the link to the slide deck, so I'm loading that up on the website, and I'll share out a simple URL for that in 1 second. And while I'm doing that, oh, great question. This is very interesting. What advice would you give, Alan, as to what the best first 3 steps to make XLAs live?
Well, I think, as I said, I think you've got to start with the dialogue, and this sounds easy, right? Let's go and have a dialogue with the business. Now, my own experience is that's not easy to do that, but we could start with a dialogue across our technology groups, because as difficult as it is for us to talk to business consumers, and this isn't just at the service management level. You know, I've worked as a CTO in very large organizations where the CIO has not, especially if they're more traditional CIO, they've not found it easy to go and talk to the business about anything other than their technology. So there is a barrier to overcome. It could be that the business doesn't really want to talk to us because their experience in the past hasn't been great. But one of the things you can do is get together as a team and be honest with yourselves and say, let's put up a cool wall. Let's put up a cool wall, and on that cool wall, we'll say, what do we think is cool? What do we think is uncool? And what do we think is sub-zero cool about what we do today? And just have a conversation about that. And it's even better if you can actually do that with the business consumer. And maybe it's just one group. Maybe it's the group that's most unhappy with you, or maybe it's the group that's most happy with you. But start to explain to them what you're trying to do. You're trying to change the game. It's almost like repenting. You're trying to create a better experience for them. You're trying to create a new way of working together within their context. But start with very simple things, like I said, like a cool wall is a great way to start.
I like that. Thank you. John is asking, our CIO wants IT to be a strategic partner. However, what does that, oh, I love this question, John, sorry. What does that mean? How do we properly shift the paradigm?
So there's two things to be said about that. Because for many organizations, the business is actually seen as the customer. And if you are happy enough to work in a more advanced environment, then you'll have a CIO, CTO, CDO who will define a partnership where, for instance, the business and technology are working together to satisfy a growth goal or an experience goal for the ultimate beneficial customer. That's the best place to be. Many times when I hear CIOs say they want to be a strategic partner to the business, there's still an element or a hint of being a provider, of being a supplier to them. So I think the first thing is we need to be realistic about what the ambition level is. Is our ambition level to team up with the business to help an ultimate beneficial customer? Because that's a long way away from the comfort zone of a lot of people. And some businesses may say, look, you know, your help desk sucks. You're really going to help me with the real customer? I don't think so. So there's all sorts of things going on there. But I think the first thing is, what do we mean by a strategic business partner? Do we really mean a better producer, a better provider to the business, or do we really mean side by side? If we really mean side by side, then that's a great opportunity to talk about XLAs and to talk about the cool wall together, to talk about the not to do list, to really design the journey that we're trying to do and the experience we're trying to divide. That's a great opportunity. So I can't look in the head of your CIO of what they really mean by that. But if they mean we're going to be a better provider, then we're still working internally to become more multidisciplinary, break down the silos, get from the KPIs to XPIs. If they really mean side by side to the real customer, that's really exciting. And you should say, hands up, I want to be part of that.
Okay, I'm just trying to pick out which one's going to be next. First of all, I have to say it's almost ridiculous, the amount of, wow, this is really useful. Here's one from Venkat. How does this work in the scenarios of hosting services which are not end user basis? Here it is all technical more than end user. Any leading clue is appreciated. And then think of it as an example. So if storage is down for 4 hours, how will the user experience be translated in case this has multiple business services on it?
Yeah, that's a complicated question to listen to. So can you give me the gist of it again?
So I think Venkat's looking for scenarios where this could work in hosting services.
So for instance, right now, the collab is working with a utility company to redefine the relationship that they have with their sourcing partners. And hosting is obviously part of that. And what's important here is to understand what the outcome of hosting needs to be. Now, they are also going through a transition. So they have, I mean, really a lot of KPIs. And they're having trouble not only measuring those KPIs, but then interpreting those KPIs. And so while everybody feels that we have an unacceptable situation, it's very difficult to put our finger on it. So what we're suggesting there is, again, to simplify it, what is it that the hosting needs to do as an outcome that we can measure? And basically try to get it back to, is that happening? Are people happy with that outcome or not? Because you don't really need to understand why they're not happy, because if it's a dialogue, then the dialogue starts when you've realized that they're not happy. And with things like NextThink and with Giartis and Maze, we can see this unhappiness immediately. So the other advantage of working with a simplified XLA structure, and simplified does not mean less valuable, is that we can see at the point of despair, if you will, that's happening, and we can step in. We don't have to wait to the end of the month or the end of the quarter to look back on that. And then we can decide what is it. Now, with the NextThink tool set, we can actually look and see what's causing that. And in fact, we can actually send out messages on it and saying, are you experiencing this? You know, could we help you in this way or that way? Can you do yes and no? So you actually start to have a very direct dialogue. I'm struggling a little bit with the question because I'm trying to imagine what type of hosting service it would be, and what type of outcome it would. You know, otherwise what we can do is take it offline and we can take it separately.
Well, I was going to say too, and Venkat, feel free to kind of chat in more if Alan didn't hit what you were after. And to Alan's point, of course, anyone who's interested in getting a little one-on-one time with him and your leadership, if you'd like, I am sure, let's look at his face while I say it, I'm sure he'd be very happy to do that. That's where you smile, Alan. And if someone, I think that I've resolved the issue on the slide deck, but if somebody who had asked me that question could just confirm that for me, I would feel better. So thank you. And this is an interesting question too. This software seems very interesting to me, but you know, obviously we don't have that in our budget for this year. What can we do outside of the software to start working toward an employee digital experience score?
Right. So I don't think you need to go software immediately, because there's a route to this, and it's quite interesting because I think it depends on the company, obviously, and the level of the conversation. I have been surprised as I move up the organization how readily executives are willing to invest in this, because I think a lot of executives are under pressure. Now, we know that certainly in traditional technology departments, there's always been a cost pressure to deliver services at an ever lower cost. But when the conversation becomes about value and it becomes about the survival of the technology group, I do find that executives are more willing to invest in it. Having said that, I do think just starting here, starting with a smaller group of people, starting with a smaller dialogue, starting with a smaller essence, the Essence of Experience workshop, it doesn't have to be this big, big program to start with at all. And I think it's also good to start practicing, because the types of conversations and techniques that you use in design thinking around this are not going to be common for everybody in the group. Sometimes they're uncomfortable because they take us away from our comfort zone. And when we're open about things that other people find uncool about what we do, there's a vulnerability there that we've got to learn to absorb, analyze, and move on. But I think there's a lot of things you can do in your own dialogues in smaller groups to analyze where you think you are, define what types of experiences you might be able to improve, and then take that up. And certainly I'd like to help you if you're talking to senior executives about why this is good for them, because there's very few executives that I meet that are not interested in cultural change or in improving engagement with employees or the experience of customers.
And Alan, I've gotten now several questions about the relationship between XLA and OLA. And well, I'm going to take it as a two-part. So can you talk to that a little bit, please?
So I'm assuming that you mean OLA is an operating level agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So an operating level agreement is was designed as a subset of an SLA, which is basically an underpinning agreement. So I would make no distinction between an SLA and OLA in terms of its failure to reflect experience. However, the OLA will be more useful to instrument the technology to support an XLA. Because what the OLA generally does is it generally looks at the technical underpinning of an SLA. That would be my opinion. Obviously, you've got a lot of experts. You've taught how many thousands of ITIL experts? So they may have a different discussion on that, or a different opinion on it. But that would be my opinion.
Sorry, I'm having a little delay when I'm trying to come off of mute. No, I would agree with that. I think, you know, there's a lot of places that it will go deeper. And I know that in the new, I think most folks on this call know that ITIL 4 has been released. The foundation class is now available. The scheme has been announced. And one of the classes, which I should have looked up the correct name, Digital and IT Strategy, or something awfully close to that. Sorry if I didn't get that correct. Is going to be talking about XLAs, and I have to assume, haven't seen the curriculum yet, but a part of that is going to be about sort of how we in service management traditionally looked and built OLAs and SLAs, and what this move toward a human-centric XLA means in terms of, you know, specifically ITIL. But obviously, this is a much greater conversation than just a traditional ITIL or service management program. And wow, there's a lot there. There are a lot of comments. A couple of people that have asked questions, Alan, have said, thank you, that did answer it. And lots more thank yous. Hey, Brenda, glad you got to be able to join us. Brenda's asking, can you articulate the relationship, oh, I don't even know, Brenda, you're so smart, between XLAs and NPS scores?
So I would, so here's the problem. So NPS is an aggregate score, as you all probably know, that says on a scale of 1 to 10, that my NPS, if it's above 8, is a positive, and if it's below, 4, is a negative. And so we take the positive and negatives away, and we get a net promoter score. The net promoter score is an aggregate score, and it's useful, right? So we use the net promoter score. It's almost like a very bad thermometer that tells you it's too hot or it's too cold. It doesn't give you surgical insight into the experience that's driving that. So oftentimes what you find, if you're looking, for instance, at an NPS that's related to a employee score, usually what then happens is that the NPS requires lots of further analysis, and you break up into work groups to try to figure out what's going on. Here we're looking very much at the experience that we're promising, the commitment that we're making that the experience will be like. So when we see that experience isn't being met, first of all, we see it in real time. It's not a thing. We see it in real time. And secondly, it gives us insights into exactly what's wrong, because we can instrument that path, that journey. So we can actually see with our technology where we're falling down. I'll give you a very, very simple example, which I know that Lisa likes, which is happy or not. So so I'm currently working at Schiphol Airport on their digital data and innovation strategy. That's the Amsterdam airport. And in every one of our public toilets, we have a happy or not button when you're in the toilet. Now that happy or not button tells us immediately if people are unhappy and where they're unhappy. It also, on frequency, tells us what the traffic is there. And it allows us to schedule the cleaning around the happy or not buttons. So and actually the happy or not button is, to all intents and purposes, a very simple XLA. Are you happy? Are you not happy? It doesn't say, you know, we're going to refresh so many of the paper towels every 10 minutes. But by using that, we then start to gather data, which we can map with other data to improve the experience that passengers or visitors at the airport are having in those areas. We can see how different cleaning crews are performing. We can see how certain toilets are performing and whether they're older or newer or refurbished and how that experience is. So again, you can't get that degree of surgical insight from an NPS, but NPSs are good, right? So I'm not saying NPSs are not good, but I'm thinking we're looking for a much better dialogue based on context than an NPS normally would give us.